The crystalline halls of the Zintharian palace reflected light in impossible angles, creating a kaleidoscope of colors that would have driven most species mad. But Laura had adapted. That's what humans did. They adapted. Queen Lisa stood at the observation deck, her 4 arms folded in contemplation, as she gazed at the twin moons rising over her capital city. Her chitinous exoskeleton gleamed with bioluminescent patterns that betrayed her anxiety, a language Laura had learned to read over their 3 cycles together. "You're troubled," Laura said, approaching quietly despite his heavy boots. After months aboard Zintharian vessels, he'd learned to move with purpose rather than stealth. Lisa's compound eyes refracted his image 1,000 times. "The Korthax Collective has issued an ultimatum. They demand we surrender our outer colonies within 10 solar rotations, or they will take them by force." Laura crossed his arms, studying the holographic display of enemy fleet positions. 47 dreadnoughts, each capable of glassing a planet. The Zintharian military, while advanced, numbered only 12 capital ships in the sector. "And your council's recommendation?" he asked. "Evacuation, retreat to the core worlds." Lisa's voice carried the harmonic undertones of her species' language, frustration mixed with resignation. "They say preserving Zintharian lives is paramount." "They're right about the lives part," Laura said, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. "Wrong about the method." Lisa turned to face him fully, all 4 arms spreading in a gesture of confusion. "Laura, I married you because you showed me a perspective I'd never considered. You taught me about human philosophy, human art, human stubbornness. But this is war. The mathematics are simple. We are outgunned, outmanned, and outmaneuvered." Laura smiled, and Lisa had learned that particular smile meant something dangerous. "Your Majesty, may I speak freely? You're my consort, you always may. You married a common human, as your court loves to remind you, the biologist who came to study extremophile bacteria on your moon colonies, the nobody from a backwater species barely a century into space travel." He walked to the hologram, his fingers dancing through the light constructs, manipulating the display with practiced ease. "But you didn't ask about my service record before I became a biologist." Lisa's bioluminescence shifted to curiosity blue. "You were military." "Special Operations, Terran Defense Force, 14 years. Laura expanded the tactical map, overlaying new data that made Lisa's breath spiracles flutter. "The thing about humanity, Lisa, is that we're very, very new to the galactic stage. We don't have antimatter cannons. We don't have quantum shields. We don't have anything the Korthax would consider a fair fight." "Then how?" "We've been fighting unfair fights for our entire existence," Laura interrupted gently. "Your species evolved on a paradise world with 3 others of similar intelligence. You developed through cooperation and mutual growth. Humans, we clawed our way up a food chain where we were prey. We survived ice ages, plagues, and ourselves. We learned to win wars we had no business winning." He pulled up schematics that made Lisa's military advisors, who had quietly entered the room, chittering in confusion. "These are human designs," Laura continued, "primitive by galactic standards, but we learned something fighting each other for thousands of years before we reached the stars. Technology doesn't win wars. Asymmetric warfare does. Psychology does. Audacity does." Admiral Kresh, Lisa's chief military officer, clicked his mandibles dismissively. "Prince Consort, with all due respect, the Korthax have conquered 17 species. They have shields that can withstand anything you shoot at them," Laura finished. "I know, I've read the reports. Their shields are magnificent. They project a quantum-locked barrier that disperses energy and momentum across 11 dimensions, absolutely impenetrable to conventional weapons." "Then you understand our dilemma," Kresh said. Laura's smile widened. "I understand that they're about to learn why Earth's unofficial motto is 'Hold my beer and watch this.'" Over the next 6 solar rotations, The Zentharian court watched in growing bewilderment as Laura orchestrated the most bizarre military preparation they'd ever witnessed. He requisitioned mining equipment, civilian fabrication plants, and oddly specific chemical compounds. He pulled personnel files, looking not for the best warriors but for engineers, chemists, and what he called creative thinkers. Lisa found him in the war room on rotation 8, surrounded by three-dimensional models and muttering calculations. "The Korthax arrive in 2 rotations," she said softly. "My people are afraid." "Good," Laura replied, not looking up. "Fear keeps you sharp. What did your ancestors do when the crater storms came?" Lisa's bioluminescence flickered with old genetic memory. "They went underground, built the first warrens." "Exactly, they adapted, they survived." Now he looked at her, and his eyes held that intensity she'd first fallen in love with. "Trust me, Lisa, I know how this looks, but I need you to trust me." She reached out with one hand, touching his face gently. "I do, but I'm still terrified." "That makes 2 of us." When the Korthax fleet emerged from hyperspace, they found the Zentharian colonies apparently defenseless. No shield nets activated, no weapons platforms powered up, just empty space and vulnerable worlds. Warlord Krathix, commanding from his flagship Inevitable Dominion, clicked his tusks in satisfaction. "They've already fled. This will be easier then." "Sir," his sensor officer interrupted, "I'm detecting debris, lots of debris, orbital trajectories but irregular. Probably evacuation remnants. Ignore it. Begin planetary scans for resource evaluation." That's when Laura struck. The debris was actually thousands of kinetic impactors, simple metal rods wrapped in stealth composites that fooled Korthax sensors into reading them as civilian wreckage. When the enemy fleet moved into position, electromagnetic catapults launched them at relativistic velocities. The Korthax shields, designed to repel energy weapons and explosive warheads, tried to process the incoming projectiles. But they were just metal, dumb metal moving at 0.15 C. The shields dispersed energy beautifully, but momentum had to go somewhere. 3 dreadnoughts simply ceased to exist, torn apart by kinetic energy equivalent to nuclear explosions. 7 more suffered catastrophic damage as follow-up strikes hammered weakened shield sections. "What was that?" Krathix roared, his command deck sparking and failing around him. Laura's voice came over every Korthax communication channel. "Warlord Krathix, this is Prince Consort Laura of Zentharia. I'm broadcasting from a very safe distance. You're currently being engaged by what we humans call kinetic kill vehicles. Very old technology, very simple, very effective." "Human," Krathix spat. "Cowardly tactics face us with honor." "Honor?" Laura laughed. "You're invading peaceful colonies and demanding surrender. But sure, let's talk honor. Here's an honorable offer. Leave now, or I show you what else humans consider outdated technology." Krathix, his pride wounded and his fleet damaged, made a fatal decision. "All ships advance, find their weapons platforms and destroy them." Laura had anticipated this. As the Korthax fleet pushed forward, they triggered the second surprise. The asteroid field wasn't natural. Laura's engineers had spent 6 rotations hollowing out asteroids, filling them with liquid hydrogen and oxygen, rocket fuel, basically, and installing simple guidance systems. Improvised missiles, each massing thousands of tons, suddenly ignited and accelerated toward the Korthax formation. The aliens could destroy them, of course, but that meant exposing their damaged ships to more kinetic strikes. And the missiles kept coming, dozens of them, forcing impossible choices. In the chaos, Lisa's fleet, hiding in the shadow of the system's gas giant, struck. Not at the dreadnoughts, but at the support ships, the tankers, repair vessels, and logistics craft that kept a fleet operational. Within 3 rotations, Krathix faced a choice: retreat and salvage his remaining forces, or push forward and potentially lose everything to an enemy that refused to fight properly. He chose survival. As the Korthax fleet limped back to hyperspace, Lisa stood beside Laura on the observation deck, watching the debris field that had once threatened her people. "You used Primitive's tactics," she said, but there was awe in her voice. "Nothing we would have considered advanced warfare." "That's the thing about being the underdog," Laura replied, pulling her close. "You learn to fight dirty, think creatively, and never ever give up. Humans have a saying, if you're in a fair fight, your tactics suck." Lisa's bioluminescence shifted to admiration gold. "The council called you a common human. They were fools." "No," Laura said gently. "They were right. I am common. That's the terrifying part, Lisa. Every human is like this. We're all descended from ancestors who looked at impossible odds and said, yeah, but what if we try anyway? It's not special training or genetic engineering. It's just humanity." He looked at her with that intensity again. "That's what HFY means. Humanity, yeah. It's not about being the strongest or the smartest. It's about being too stubborn to quit and creative enough to find another way. It's about looking at impossible odds and making them possible anyway." Lisa was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'm very glad I married you. Even though I'm common." "Especially because you're common," she said. "If one common human can do this, imagine what humanity could accomplish as our allies." Laura grinned. "Now you're thinking like a human." And in the crystalline halls of the palace, where light bent in impossible ways, the court of Zentheria learned an important lesson. Never underestimate a species that learned to thrive by refusing to accept defeat. The stars belonged to the strong, the wise, and the advanced. But they feared the stubborn. The end.